In January of 2009, the most powerful man in the world had a problem. Barack Obama, entering the White House, was told he had to give up his personal device. It was a security risk. But this wasn't just any device. It was his BlackBerry. The president fought his own security detail to keep it, and he won. A specially hardened, encrypted version was created just for him. It was the ultimate product placement. The BlackBerry wasn't just a phone. It was a symbol of seriousness, of being connected to the levers of power. Meanwhile, 2 years earlier, another company had revealed a different vision of the future. A slick slab of glass from Apple. Inside Research in Motion, the Canadian company behind BlackBerry, the reaction was reportedly dismissive. Co-founder and CEO Mike Lazaridis couldn't see how a touchscreen could compete with the tactile perfection of his physical keyboard. The line, repeated in various forms across Silicon Valley lore, was, "Try typing a real email on a piece of glass." For a time, he seemed right. The company, trusted by presidents and bankers, was facing a shiny toy. It looked like a fad. It was not. To understand the fall, you have to understand the height. And in 2008, Research in Motion was on top of the world. Its market capitalization peaked at over $70 billion, making it the most valuable company in Canada. It felt untouchable. Fiscal year 2011 would mark its absolute zenith in volume, revenue of $19.9 billion, with 52.3 million devices shipped in a single year. This wasn't just a successful company, it was a cultural phenomenon. They called it the CrackBerry. That blinking red LED light was a Pavlovian trigger for an entire generation of professionals. It promised an urgent message, a deal closing, a connection that mattered. People slept with them, took them to dinner, and mastered the art of typing with their thumbs under a boardroom table. BlackBerry Messenger, or BBM, was the original encrypted, instant-read social network. It was exclusive, fast, and addictive. For a time, your BBM PIN was a greater status symbol than your phone number. The physical keyboard wasn't a feature, it was an identity. It said you were busy, you were important, and you wrote real emails. But the real genius of BlackBerry wasn't just the hardware, it was the architecture. Every email, every BBM message was routed through RIM's own secure network operations centers. This centralized design gave corporations and government agencies unparalleled control and security. BlackBerry Enterprise Server, or BES, was the IT department's dream. They could wipe devices remotely, enforce policies, and keep data locked down. This earned them coveted security certifications like the FIPS 140-2 validation, making BlackBerry the default choice for the Pentagon, Wall Street, and the White House. And this fortress had a golden moat. Unlike Apple, which just sold the phone, BlackBerry charged the carriers a monthly service fee for every single user connecting to its network. It was a brilliant business model, turning each of the tens of millions of users into a recurring annuity. This steady stream of high-margin service revenue made the company incredibly profitable. The hardware was the razor, the data service was the blades, and they were selling millions of them every single month. It seemed like a perfect, unbreakable system. The first cracks in the fortress appeared not as a frontal assault, but as a subtle shift in the landscape. The iPhone didn't just introduce a touchscreen, it introduced a real web browser. Mobile Safari, with its pinch to zoom and fluid rendering, made the internet on a phone feel effortless. In contrast, the BlackBerry browser was a relic. It was slow, clunky, and often broke complex web pages. It was designed for a world of simple text and WAP pages, not the rich, interactive web that was emerging. The phone that owned email was suddenly losing the internet. Then came the App Store in 2008. It transformed the phone from a communication tool into a pocket computer. Suddenly, there were games, utilities, and novelties. It created an entire ecosystem for developers to build and sell software. Research in Motion was caught flat-footed. They launched BlackBerry App World a year later, in 2009, but it was too late. The gold rush was on, and developers were flocking to iOS and, soon after, Android. RIM's Java-based platform was seen as difficult and less lucrative. They were asking developers to build for a shrinking island, while entire new continents of users were appearing elsewhere. Inside RIM, the keyboard was more than a product. It was an article of faith. The company's leadership was dominated by engineers who believed in its superiority for the serious user. This belief hardened into Dogma. The touchscreen was a toy for consumers, for watching videos and playing games. Their core market, the enterprise, would never abandon the efficiency of physical keys. This wasn't just a miscalculation. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of the future. The market was no longer divided between work and play. The consumer was coming to the enterprise, and they wanted one device that could do it all. The first major attempt to bridge this gap was a disaster. In late 2008, RIM launched the BlackBerry Storm. It was their answer to the iPhone, a full touchscreen device. But it was a touchscreen born of compromise. To satisfy the keyboard dogma, the entire screen was a single physical button. You had to press down hard until it clicked to register a touch. It was called SurePress, and it was an engineering solution to a problem that didn't exist. It felt sluggish and unnatural. Compounded by buggy software, the Storm was a critical and commercial failure. Anecdotes from carriers suggested return rates were astronomical. Instead of an iPhone killer, it was a brand killer. If the Storm was a misstep, the PlayBook tablet was a faceplant. Launched in April 2011 to compete with the iPad, it was a piece of hardware that seemed to fundamentally misunderstand its own company's reason for being. The BlackBerry PlayBook shipped without a native, built-in app for email, calendar, or contacts. To get the core functions that made BlackBerry a household name, you had to connect the tablet to a BlackBerry phone over a Bluetooth connection called BlackBerry Bridge. The company that put email in everyone's pocket was now selling a tablet that couldn't check email on its own. It was a baffling, inexcusable decision that signaled deep dysfunction between RIM's hardware and software divisions. Then, in October 2011, the unthinkable happened. The Fortress crumbled. A cascading technical failure within BlackBerry's secure network operations centers triggered a massive global service outage. For more than 3 days, tens of millions of users across Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and the Americas lost email and BBM. The blinking red light went dark. The one thing BlackBerry promised above all else, rock-solid reliability, was shattered. The centralized architecture that was its greatest security strength became its single point of failure. At the precise moment they needed to look dependable against their flashier rivals, their entire network went silent. The public apology from CEO Mike Lazaridis felt like a eulogy. The weirdest part of the decline was how healthy one number looked. Even as its U.S. market share was collapsing, from a dominant 43% in 2010 to around 10% by 2012, its global subscriber base kept climbing, peaking at nearly 80 million in late 2012. This was the curse of a long sales cycle. Millions in developing markets were still buying cheaper, older BlackBerry models. On paper, the subscriber count masked the rot. But inside the company, they knew the truth. High-value customers in North America were leaving in droves. Developers were gone, and the all-important carrier partners were now pushing iPhones and Androids as their flagship devices. The momentum was an illusion. In January 2012, the two men who built the empire, Mike Lazaridis and Jim Balsillie, stepped down as co-CEOs. Their replacement, Torsten Heinz, staked the company's future on one last throw of the dice, a completely new operating system called BlackBerry 10. Launched in 2013 on two new devices, the all-touch Z10 and the keyboard-equipped Q10, it was actually a pretty good product. The gesture-based interface was slick, the security was top-notch, and it had a clever hub for all your messages. But it was years too late. The world had moved on. The app gap was now a chasm. The mobile platforms had been chosen, and BlackBerry was not one of them. The story of BlackBerry is the story of a company trapped by its own success. Every one of its strengths became a fatal weakness. The keyboard they perfected blinded them to the possibilities of a full-screen computer in your pocket. The secure, centralized network that governments loved prevented them from embracing the open internet. The lucrative service fees from carriers, that beautiful annuity, made them terrified of a business model where the money was in apps and ecosystems, not data plans. Their moat didn't just protect them, it became a prison, cutting them off from the innovations happening outside its walls. By September 2016, it was over. BlackBerry announced it would stop designing its own phones, licensing the brand to third parties. The company that defined the smartphone retreated, pivoting to become a software and security firm. And it survived. The security DNA found a new life in enterprise software and, through its QNX division, in the computer systems of millions of cars. The ghost of BlackBerry still runs in the background of our modern world. It's a quiet legacy for a brand that was once the loudest thing in the room, a permanent reminder that, in technology, the throne is never permanent, and no advantage is safe from a future you refuse to see.